Hey, this is Too Fast here. And recently I dug out some older car stereo components out of my closet. That's been sitting there for quite a few years. Due to, starting a family and having kids, I totally forgot I even had those things stored away in the closet. But basically I had some JL audio subs, kicker subs, a couple of PPI amps, Orion amps. So they're pretty decent stuff. And I thought, why let it go to waste? So I'm actually going to be installing an amplifier in this van and also building a new subwoofer box for one of the kicker subs I have. And I will show you the process and steps in doing such an install. And it's very straightforward, it's not difficult, and it'll apply to anyone that's interested in doing such an install for your vehicle. And it doesn't matter if you have new equipment, older equipment. The procedure hasn't really changed in the last 20 years. So hopefully after watching my video you get an idea on how to install an amplifier and install a subwoofer box and perhaps even build your own. So let's get started.
So far what I've done is I've ran the power cable and it's connected to the battery terminal, as you can see here, and then it goes to a fuse. And we'll run this over to the passenger side. The reason the passenger side is because on this vehicle, the driver's side, really there's no access. But I did find a grommet where a bundle of wire is going in right now, and I'll be feeding it right in there. So that's where I'm going to put the power cable through. And if you take out the glove box on the passenger side, you'll see that the grommet is right over here, right behind the glove box. So you just have to pull the power wire through. And that's how I'm able to get the power wire into the vehicle. The next thing is to remove the side step here and then pull up the weather stripping on the side. I'm going to feed the power cable over here. And I also took out the side trim pieces, and these are the ones on the side. And there's a front torque screw you just have to remove, and then we'll get access to the bolt that holds down the seat. I'm going to mount the amplifier underneath the front passenger seat, so that's why I'm going to basically take out the bolts holding down the front passenger seat. And on the back, if you lift up the carpet, you see the bolt on each side. There's one over here and one over here. We'll take those out. So what I'm doing is mounting this PPI amp right underneath the seat here, as you can see. And it's just enough clearance. I double check a couple times, make sure that when you slide the seat it's not going to bump anything. And it's a good fit right now, so I'm going to run some wires, the power wire, the ground wire, to this area, and continue with the install. So as far as all the connection I need to make, you see these speaker cables. These are actually connected back up to the factory radio. And if you saw my last video, I installed an aftermarket radio, but I kept the factory radio. And when I had this all apart, I actually tapped into the speaker output of the factory deck, and I ran the cable all the way back. And these are the ones you see. So these are going to be the high level speaker input into the amplifier. And of course you saw me ran the power cable, and also I have a 12 volt remote turn on, and also this silver cable you see here is going to be the ground. And over here on the other side of the amplifier, these are connected up. And for the ground, I'm just going to locate a chassis ground. And all I've done here is get a disc sander and just grind off the paint. And grind off the paint. And then get a multimeter. And you gotta do this, you gotta make sure that the ground is good. So get a multimeter and check the ground connectivity. So That's a good ground. And I'm going to use some self-tapping screws and mount the ground over here. I want to take a moment to talk about the remote wire that I need to trigger the amplifier. And as you know, this is a base model, so it doesn't have the bow system. So there isn't a 12-volt remote wire coming out of this radio. So I looked around and I realized that there is one wire that will give an output whenever a radio is on. And that is a rear AV control remote wire. It outputs 4.38 volt every time the radio is on. And also can be toggled. If you press the rear AV, you'll see on the display here, it'll say rear control on, rear control off. Whenever it's off, it's 0 volt. Whenever it's on, it will output the 4.38 volt DC. So at first I thought about, using a relay, and this is the relay I got. This is a 5-volt relay, and I was hoping that the voltage will be enough to drive the coil, so trip the relay switch inside to pass the 12 volt. But it wasn't enough current. The relay here, I think it uses about 60 milliamp, and it just wasn't, there wasn't enough current out of that remote wire to drive this relay. So the next thing I thought about was using a transistor. And this is basically the circuit that I'm using, minus the capacitor. Don't need that here. And also I took out that capacitor here, but this is the circuit that I'm using. And the transistor I'm using is a BC548. So here is the circuit board I built, and what you're looking at here is the BC548 NPN transistor, and beside that, black box next to it is a relay. It's a 12-volt relay. So the transistor will take that 4.38 volt trigger from the radio. It'll drive that transistor, and it'll basically turn on that transistor, and it'll allow the current flow on the coil of that 12-volt relay. And let me show it to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the rear AV, switching on that 4.38 volt, and as you can see on the multimeter, it's 0 volt right now. So if I turn it on, you see the multimeter shows 12.45 volt. So that will be my 12 volt trigger going to the amplifier. And that red LED is just a little indicator I put in so that I know when it's on. But I'm glad I was able to have this circuit, so it will allow me to have a 12 volt trigger for the amplifier. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the ability to turn on and off the amp with the factory radio. So again, turn it off, 0 volt, turn it on, 12 volt. So here I'm building the subwoofer box, and I did some calculation for the ported box, and I'm going to tune this to about 38 Hertz, and it's going to accommodate one 10-inch sub that I'll be putting in here. So that's why I'm going to cut these MDF wood to the proper dimension and then put this box together. So to assemble the box, what I do is that I use a good wood glue between all the pieces, and then I use a brad nailer to secure the pieces together. The glue will actually be the bonding agent between the pieces, and the nail is basically to just hold everything in place. So here's the box with all the pieces put together. I'm going to get a jigsaw and cut out the hole for the woofer. The back, I'm going to cut out a 4-inch diameter hole for the port. Now for the port that I need to use in this box is going to be a 4-inch diameter. So I picked up this PVC pipe from Home Depot, and this is the pipe that I'll be using to install into this subwoofer box. And the length I need is going to be 11 3/4 right here. 11 3/4 inch. So I'm going to cut right here to give me that length. So I use a table saw over there and just carefully and slowly use that to cut the pipe to the right length that you need. And it gives you a nice smooth cut, as you can see. Now after you do that, then what you want to do is get a file or sandpaper. I prefer a metal file like this that I have here. And what you want to do is round off the edges here. Okay, and that will basically limit the port noise when the air comes rushing out of this pipe here. And that's what I'm going to do right here. So just go along the edge. And this is very rough sanding, grinding, and then after you do that, get some finer grit sandpaper and just smooth out the edges. So when it's all done, it should look something like this. So you have the rounded edge. So once I figured out where I want to put the port, go ahead and pencil in the outer diameter of the pipe, and then I'm going to put the speaker cable plates right below that around here. So if you want to give your box a nice smooth round edge, then what you can do is put it through a router. I have a small one here, and basically run the box along the edge. Make sure you have your safety glasses on, and just go around all the edges so that all the corners, all the edges are nice and smooth. Now the last thing I like to do is get an orbital sander and just go around the edges one more time, just smooth out the edges, and that should be good. So the next thing you want to do is get some sealant and seal all the seams inside to make sure that there's no leaks of any type, and just run a bead of silicone around all the edges. So I installed the 4-inch port, and it's a perfect fit, as you can see. And then on the other end, also put some sealant around the side. Make sure it's nice and secure. So here's the subwoofer box at this stage.